Mr. Scary Studios.
I was in the bathroom getting ready for our date night. Brian promised me early this morning he will take me out tonight after a long, busy week. The bedroom door creaked open. I rolled my eyes and sighed. Max, bed is off limits. Your fur gets all over the comforter. Stubborn dog, he needs his own bed to play on. I look at the time, and it's 6:06. Our reservation is at 6:30. I hope we're not late. I hear the front door open, and I call out to him, "Babe, I'm in the bathroom getting ready. Be out in a second." Silence, I stopped applying my lipstick. Bobbed my head to one side, trying to listen for anything. Nothing. I went downstairs to see what's going on. The front door is open. I walked towards the door and stepped outside, and I saw my neighbor and her 3-year-old son with Max just outside their porch. "Hey, Katie, Max, come over to our lawn and played all day with Luke. Didn't you notice at the time? Hope you don't mind," she said with a smile. All day. It's 6:11 p.m. I see Brian's car pulling in our driveway. Right, short rerun of past events. Had the luck to get a textbook stalker for my first girlfriend. I guess that's what you get for picking somebody up from the mental clinic. Probably problematic youth. Had a whole string of problems to work out myself. Dysfunctional family and all of that. Not important here though, so let's skip the details and just say that she maneuvered herself into being a sort of beacon of comfort and mutual understanding for me. And in the first 2 months, we really did good to each other. After that, not so much anymore. Anyway, after another half a year of extremely nerve-wracking relationship, inches short of killing myself from the pressure she put on me, we went apart pretty bad. Plenty of hurt on both sides, and I felt pressed to flee to another county. Not country, county. Anyway, my life went on pretty normal for the next 6 years, with literally no trace of her. But out of the blue, she stands at my mom's door. I visited her for a month during the semester to help with the house repairs that probably made her think I'm back, telling me that she can't trust anybody, that some people are out to get her, and if we could maybe pick up training together again. Back when we took kickboxing and knife lessons together, quote unquote. I shit you not, completely forgot about that. She was carrying all of her stuff in her backpack so nobody could tamper with it, claiming that somebody keeps breaking into her apartment. Of course, my conscience tells me to help to look into this, even if only to dismantle her paranoia as baseless. But I know how stalkers work. I was forced to invest a lot of energy on learning to deal with them, and am aware that this might very well just be some twisted kind of psychosis-induced guilt ploy. I'm legit shitting my pants, but at the same time, I can't live with myself if something is really going on. No human being, no matter your relationship to them, deserves to be turned down in a call for help. For now, I've offered that she can come to my mom's house and tell her the story in full when she is done with whatever urgent business she has to take care of right now, but warned her that I'll only be there for the remainder of the evening. I felt that this isn't crossing the line and giving her any ideas at that moment, but I'm starting to have doubts. Please, if there are any folks out there with the psycho education to get my angle, give me advice. This story has a small element of paranormal to it, but I think it mainly belongs in Let's Not Meet, due to the creeper involved. I'm new, so if I'm wrong, please let me know. I was in my 30s and working at a small graphic arts company that produced content for magazines. The company rented a suite of rooms in a high-rise building that housed many other small companies. I was the receptionist and located in the front room. Behind me was my supervisor's office. To the left was a huge room where the graphic artists had their workspaces. There were 2 doors to the suite, the one right in front of my reception desk and the one in the graphic artist's room. They used that door for entry every morning, since they could walk straight to their desks. I had come in about an hour early so that I could concentrate on billing without visitors and phones. I had left my door unlocked, but didn't check the other door. Since the employees had keys to it, a moment later, I heard a knob jiggling at the employee door, assuming one of the guys had arrived early, but had forgotten their key. I got up and started toward that door. I'd only taken a few steps into the workroom when I heard a woman call my name from the reception area. That jiggling had stopped. So I thought the employee had come through the door into the reception area. I went back to my desk, but no one was there. Then I saw the shadow of someone standing in front of the unlocked door. I reached out, and I swear to God, I don't know why, but instead of turning the knob and opening the door, I locked it. The person on the other side jiggled the knob, and I just stood there, frozen, but not knowing why. Then the person walked away. Shaking, I went back to my desk, leaving the door locked, and tried to figure out what had just happened. Who had called my name? Why I had just locked the door? Why didn't the person knock? The worst part happened about a week earlier. Everyone in the building received a notice telling us to keep all of our doors locked unless it was working hours, and never to be alone in the office. A woman working alone early in the morning had been attacked and sexually assaulted. To this day, I firmly believe that the woman would have been me had it not been for the woman calling my name and somehow making me lock the door instead of opening it. Okay, so I'm going to change some details in the story for the sake of anonymity. The events in this story actually fucked with my head a bit, and it took me a while to come to the terms with it. About 10 years ago, I studied abroad. I had few friends in this new country, and was glad to find a house place to live with some cool people on my age. I started hanging with this crew, which became my friends, and we used to smoke a lot of weed. Things were sweet. There was this friend of my roommates, Frank, that came over to our place from time to time. I thought it was odd because he was like twice everybody's age. He was very intense as a person, and made me feel slightly uncomfortable the first time I met him. He seemed extremely suspicious of me and would ask me all kinds of questions to suss me out. But he had a good sense of humor and would always crack great jokes. In a way, he was a kind of charming, and my roommates seemed to love him. Also, he always brought pizza. I asked one of my friends what the deal was with this guy, and he was like, "Oh, you don't know? Last year he found his wife and her brothers murdered in their flat. He is under investigation, but he didn't do it." I was taken back by this. How could they really know he didn't do it? And why did they want to hang around with a potential psycho? I gave it the benefit of doubt, but I certainly saw Frank in a new light now. Time went, and Frank came by our place almost daily. He was very clever and sly, manipulative. I got to know more about his background. He used to be in a gang when he was my age. He had been in prison most of the time in between then, and now for violence. This did not help me in trusting him. I could not believe how naive my roommates were to trust this man. The police went out and declared him a suspect. By now, this had become the biggest investigation ever in that particular area. He was interrogated but released for lack of evidence. Back home at our place, he would sit and talk about how he was a victim of a conspiracy, and all my friends would nod and believe him. I felt crazy being the only one who didn't believe it. He must have sensed it because he took me outside and asked me if I believed him. I said yeah, sure I did, because by now I was starting to get really afraid of him. I asked about the murders and he told me his version of the event, where he, according to him, found the bodies. It was gruesome. But I still had doubts, and to my horror, he would at another time crack jokes about the whole thing. Who in their right mind would joke about that? In my mind, only a complete psychopath. I started researching what a psychopath actually is and learned that this guy fit every classical definition. I freaked out because I couldn't figure out what he really wanted from us. I started getting paranoid and started believing that he actually planned on killing me and my roommates. I couldn't tell this to my roommates because they were fully blinded by this guy's charades and trusted him. At one point, I started sleeping with a knife in my bed. That's how scared I was that he was going to come and murder us like he murdered those poor souls. This was a horrible time for me. On top of that, police had been tipped off about the relatively large amounts of weed being kept in the house and started raiding the place. 2 of my roommates were busted, and this marked the break up of our collective, the day I moved out. Frank helped me with stuff and looked at me menacingly, as I always found him. "You are all right," he said. "I actually planned on killing you, but you're all right. I kid not." He told me this. The others would laugh it off as a joke, but I saw it very differently. I was very glad to leave after hanging out with this murderer on and off for 1 to 5 years. Frank would be arrested shortly later, starting a huge trial that lasted several years. I found some new friends and found back to some normality in my life. That's when I realized how fucked up the whole situation was. I had been isolated with all this and had no one else to go to. A year later, I was back in my home country and followed the trial. All the craziness that surfaced about this man during the trial would have convinced me that I was probably right all along. He was proper mental and was convicted to 4 life sentences. He will never be a free man again. Update. Thanks for all the upvotes and feedback. I'm new to Reddit and was very pleasantly surprised to see that many people are interested in my story. I'll respond to questions and comments below. This event happened about 3 years ago, sometime just after 12 p.m. on a clear day. At the time, I was dating a woman, and we had our arguments. I was walking her home from my house, which is branched about 10 blocks or so down the boulevard from hers. As we were walking, we started to argue about something, and we were nearing her house, maybe only a couple blocks away. As the argument started to heat up, I decided to end it just before we made it to her street. I turned around and started my walk home while she continued on her way. We were a few houses apart when a van packed full of men passed slowly as they were looking for something. They looked suspicious as hell, so I keep watching them as they drive past in the middle of the street. I see one male jump out of the van from the sliding door on its side and start walking up a driveway. But instead of going down into the house, he turns on the sidewalk and starts following my girlfriend. The van is still creeping down the street and is slowly getting closer to the curbside when we were walking. I turned around and started a very strong power walk towards them, with all my attention on these guys on what these guys are doing. I'm closing the gap between us, and I heard and noticed by the man on the sidewalk, he seemed surprised and off put as we catch each other's gaze. He turns towards the van and gets in all casual, like he wasn't about to abduct a person. They then drive away at a normal speed, and I've never seen them again. I catch up to my girlfriend to let her know about someone following her, and our prior fight is history, as we were both relieved from the thought of what could have happened. My town doesn't have much crime, but we did have a few missing persons, in fact a few years ago. I now always escort my lady to in front of her door, as a lesson learned in public safety. To the creepy pack van, let's not meet again, ever. I live in Los Angeles, full of posers, actors, waiters, savages, saviors, immigrants, transplants, criminals, and spectrums of individuals. I meet plenty of whack jobs, in other words. This particular incident occurred in 2010. Around 9 p.m. I was in the driver's seat of a friend's small two-door Infiniti coupe and entering the very busy 405 headed to my house to get dropped off for the evening. As I am entering, a man in a U-Haul is attempting to exit the following ramp. There was minimal distance between us as we were nearly parallel as I got on, and he perceived this as me intentionally cutting him off. I get into the next left lane within seconds. The man speeds up next to us and rolls down his window and proceeds to barrage us with a stream of vulgar insults. My friend, being the intelligent young man that he was, reciprocates in offensive words, and to my horror throws an empty water bottle that bounces off the U-Haul. Mistake. The man immediately jerks his car behind us instead of exiting on the upcoming ramp. Suddenly I get a pull of dread in the pit of my stomach. He is so close to the back of the car. I can see the crazed eyes of disheveled, oily face Hispanic guy, 35 plus, age 35 plus, is what he looked like. I speed up, but I'm paralyzingly afraid because it's become clear to me this man matches my acceleration speed, that he is not going to let this go, and he wants to punish us. He is honking maniacally, flashing his lights, causing a scene behind us. I tell my friend he's going to hit us, and he won't. No, he won't. Speed up. I do to a degree, but I'm nervous of being chased at high speeds, and I want other drivers to witness this man's behavior. Not even 5 seconds after he tells me to speed up, the U-Haul crashes passenger side into the end of the coupe and successfully sends us into a fishtail spin, slamming us into a freeway wall. The car is ripped apart from the concrete, yet somehow we are unscathed. He calls the cops, recounts the story, omitting the water bottle portion, of course. I'm literally visibly trembling. I'm fairly certain if this guy had a gun, he would have shot into our vehicle. He was angry. Luckily, 2 separate spectators called the police and reported his license plate. One going so far as to follow him off the freeway and witnesses him attempt to remove his plates. Turns out he was an immigrant with no legal license who has a previous criminal history involving what else but meth. They never found the guy, assuming he left the U.S. My friend ended up suing the U-Haul for renting out a vehicle to this man without a valid license. We lost contact shortly thereafter, but 2 years later he contacted me on Facebook telling me I had a check waiting for me at his lawyer's. To this day, I am deathly afraid of car accidents and potential scenarios of road rage. A shiver slithered down Samuel's spine as he crushed the frayed cigarette beneath his boots. Wisps of his breath were carried away into the night, trailing up towards the darkness as he frantically rubbed his hands together for heat. The Christmas holidays had passed into a blur, and soon Samuel would be back at the Smith & Son supermarket behind the moldy counter, serving old customers in the polka dot uniform that he was burdened with. Snow fell delicately upon his shoulders and littered the trees and rooftops as he turned to walk into his home. A sudden movement caught his eye. Samuel turned ever so slowly, his hands bunched into fists. Bears were common around these parts, and he couldn't take any risks. But when he turned, all he saw was an elderly man with a wide grin spread across his face, displaying rows of blackened teeth. The man's clothes were rags, torn to shreds and falling apart. "Sir, are you all right?" Samuel called nervously, walking in a cautious manner towards the man. He didn't want to get too close. There was something about the way the man stood, waiting and watching. The wind whipped his hair about while the snow bashed at his face, and he stood there, smiling. Something was definitely wrong. "Sir, are you okay?" Samuel asked again, observing the elderly man's pale face. But still he stood, his smile unwavering. His eyes were as white as the snow beneath his feet, and the man's arms hung limply by his sides. Samuel's heart jolted as the man bobbed awkwardly towards him, still smiling. "Is this some sort of a joke?" Samuel questioned. But because it isn't funny, the elderly man carried on bobbing towards Samuel, unaffected by the words, his long gray hair swaying as he bobbed. The elderly man stopped moving, and his face so close to Samuel's that Samuel could feel his hot breath on his neck. He then let out a dark laughter. It's a low demonic tone, rupturing Samuel's confidence. "They're gonna get your family," he sang before bobbing back down to the garden, still smiling, his hair swaying as he vanished into the darkness. Samuel dismissed the man's words and turned to walk into his home, but was taken back when a piercing scream erupted from inside. The man's voice floated out from the darkness beyond the garden. "They're gonna kill your family!"